Quasar Markets. It's Jeremy. I'd like to introduce him with Dave DC Conley with the Solving America's Problems collaboration, where we are creating a cool intersection of finance, politics, money, what's going on, what's present, what's happening. And do you have any data, Dave, on new Fed chair stuff? New Fed chairs happening today.
Any data? Any data on datum on the new Fed? No, not really.
Yep.
So I know this administration like went hard in the paint on Powell.
Yep.
And it was really just like, bend to my will and lower rates, right? Like this is a real estate guy and he wants low rates. And we've had low rates for a quarter of a century, right?
Yeah.
And, the Fed, it seems like that they did a relatively amount of, sort of independence and be like, well, we got to raise rates and now we're going to do a pause. And now, everything I've seen is like, look, like you jump oil by 40% and that's inflationary and we got all this other stuff going on in the economy. So it's like now they're kind of like that emoji that's like the hands up in the air and like, we don't know.
Yep.
And so this guy, like everybody that's been put in by the administration has been thought of as sort of, like just bending to the will of the administration. They're not independent. The Fed's supposed to be independent and yada, 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 right? So the question is like, what are they going to do once they get in? I think some of Trump's Supreme Court picks have surprised people in their independence, right?
Yeah.
Certainly right-leaning or constitutionalist or corporatists more often than not. So I think that's surprised people somewhat pleasantly. But like when you put in a Fed chair, frankly, I don't know what a Fed chair does. Do they just like, gavel the meetings together and like the other Fed people are like, okay, this is what we're going to do? Or do they have decision-making power? I don't know. What does a Fed chair do?
They're the talking head for what the president tells them to do in the back office. It's my thought. Yeah, I do envision them sitting down with like a small glass of neat brandy, and they got a bunch of like newspapers around, and people walk up, their buddies come up to them, and they kind of like just talk about the economy and the CPI numbers, and then they just kind of throw darts at the board, and they flip a coin a bunch.
all the libertarians will scream like, no, in the Fed.
Yeah, precisely. It's a very interesting position, like the Fed chair, if you think about it. It's really interesting. Like, from example, like who votes on them? How do they get in?
Yeah.
How long are they there for? What's their tenure? What's their background?
Yeah.
And to your point, what do they do?
Right.
Most people don't even know what the Fed is. Because what's interesting, quick, super fast. I'm not going to go down this tangent. But it's not a federal anything, and it's not a reserve.
So it has neither reserves but don't they like keep things on their balance sheet? Like they buy like a lot of stuff and like but that's not the Fed. There's something else. I don't know.
Yeah,
this is all voodoo. Like what?
Yeah.
What do humans need to know? Like what? Like how does it affect our lives? Like what happens?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, it's to me, it will be a very interest rate dependent, right? And I've been saying this for a while. Trump's number one goal is to get interest rates lower and to buy more oil, increase the prices of real estate, increase the price of the stock market, and decrease the cost of living, which hasn't happened yet, and obviously get more oil. Because we need more of that. So those are the two big things that Trump's goals are kind of focused on. I said two that haven't happened yet specifically, but ultimately I think, Fed chair coming in is just interesting because people love to blame the Fed chair on the stock market moving based on what they say. And so they're going to have a bunch of algorithms tied to that. And so I'm looking forward to the new memes because, Jerome Powell had the meme for a long time, as long as with all the other Fed chairs in the past of like printing the money machine and just spinning the wheel of the printer, the magical money printer in the US where, we need more money to buy something. Yeah. Just turn the printer on. Let's just make more of it. It's not a big deal. It's fine. So speaking of inflation, CPI comes out Wednesday, I believe. The
Ooh.
anticipated results of that are, or the expected number is three and some change, 3.7%
Yeah.
is the consensus year over year. Um, and again, same thing, man. I'm always kind of like, what is this number? And what does it
Right.
actually mean? How does it actually affect me?
Right.
There was a very short period of time in the markets where this number really, really mattered, and people did pay all kinds of attention to it.
Hmm.
And right now, they just really don't. But generally, this number is supposed to mean like how high is inflation? How does it feel uh, from an inflationary standpoint? And there was a time not that long ago where this was in the 6%, 6, 7%. People are like, man, inflation sure is high. We have so much inflation.
Hmm.
The cost of goods are so high. I mean, this is a consumer price index, right? So it's like how much I am a consumer. What are the prices of things that I spend on? And
Right.
when it was at 6%, everyone said, man, it sure feels a lot higher. And now that it's at 3, it's like, wait a minute. So the prices of things have gone down, although every time I spend money, I spend more
Well,
than I have in the last decade on almost
uh,
anything.
everything. Well, inflation is a cumulative number, right? So like when it's like if it's 3% or it's 6%, and like at the end of the day, that's 18%, right? And like that's
Yeah.
like it has to show negative for it to actually go down. And I, just talking to my buddy Joe and Julie, who were here for a couple of days, like they were kind of blown away. Like they are feeling it, they are seeing it, and like these are not people that are like uber connected into like what the sort of the ins and the outs, but they were saying what everyone that I'm talking to is saying is like, holy smokes, things are really expensive, and gas is out of control, and food and like there's nothing that's getting more reasonable. At least like you could have maybe have counted on being able to get a cheap TV, but even then it's like, oh, how many TVs are you buying, right?
Yeah.
Or getting your Timu, being
Yeah.
able to get something quite reasonable. And like I'm feeling it in the areas where I'm, making some choice purchases, and it's like I look at the numbers and it just seems completely disconnected from value, and that's where I'm running into it. And I can imagine people who are living paycheck to paycheck or only have $500 or like one broken car, payment away from like disaster. Like that's all the disposable income that somebody might have. Like you and I are talking about UBI in our next series, and that's going to be coming up with, like with all the different programs that we have in the United States. Like if we're driving people into poverty, that's an issue. It's totally underreported in the United States. Like I'm reading what's going on in Europe. Like they had riots in Ireland, like actual riots. Usually, like that's no kidding, and it was over fuel
Yeah.
costs, right?
Yep.
Here in South Florida, I walked by a gas station, and like regular gas was over $5 a gallon. Diesel was over $6 a gallon, and everything that uses diesel, which is basically everything that you can consume in any given day, from the food in your mouth to the power that's in your head, over your head, is done with fuel like that. And like that's being passed on directly to people, and there's no end in sight on that. Like even if things like magically popped up tomorrow, with hey, all's good, these are really sticky markets, and so it's going to be
Yeah.
this slow sort of drift. Like, will we see $60 a barrel oil gas in our in our lifetime again? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, right.
that's actually a great question. Will we? I think I would take the under on that. Yeah. Like we don't. Um,
Right. I mean, I was looking at getting some plane tickets. It is not. It's like we are coming up
bro, I don't
on
want to fly
travel.
anywhere. I don't want to
No,
fly anywhere.
no. It's like,
And I have 2 or 3 flights scheduled. Yeah, 2 or 3 flights scheduled. But they are. It is Pricezilla out there. It's on the expensive side.
So, I
So
mean, I don't know what CPI actually measures because it doesn't seem to
yeah,
measure
precisely. No,
like the
nothing.
actual pain that people are feeling. Like if it's like, oh, cost of this and cost of that, I'm like, oh wow, I don't know, man. So that's what I think. Like if our listeners and people are watching us, we say it on Tuesdays. I say it on Tuesdays. I say it on Thursdays when we're with Steve. Like if you're not paying attention to politics, you're not paying attention to your portfolio. And so like when you're wondering, it's like, hey, how does these two things work? Like that's where the rubber's going to meet the road on things. Now you don't have to be like completely like in it like I am. Like that you'll need like a sort of a shower every day to kind of get the politics off you. But you do need to pay attention because it's the biggest employer in the United States, and it's the biggest spender in the United States, and so that's where things really make a difference. And coming up this week also is Trump meeting with China. Where do you think that's what do you think that's going to do to portfolios this week?
This week should be pretty volatile. I mean, there's a lot going on. Ironically enough, and realistically, if I pull up a quick screen share of the market, ultimately what's happening is, and this does always occurs at very unique times, but essentially with it, the market as high as it is. So here's the broader S&P 500, right? All-time highs. Here's a crazy thing. If we go back to April 1st, aka a month and a half ago, we're up 17% on the S&P 500, which was one of the largest moves in human history. Just straight up V bottom recovery
Right.
from a very, very, very small down move. And so we actually need volatility and turbulence up here just to have some level of actual normalcy,
Yeah.
because traders, investors like myself are like, we're too high to do anything.
Yeah.
So we actually need a little bit of selling for just some form of like, okay, this is not an actual bubble to come in so that people can actually have and taste some fear. Apple, highest price in human history. And you had great earnings. I mean, again, look at this, dude. Apple, $111 billion in a quarter. And so in my opinion, this Apple earnings are CPI, because
Yeah.
that's what people actually spend money on is
Right.
computers,
Right.
iTunes, the Apple Store, iPads, iPhones, and they spent it. They spent it. And so looking at the chart, to me, just kind of briefly, we have a little bit of a wave structure that I would expect Apple, if it does pull back to 287, to be very, very buyable. And I've been telling people since earnings that we'd hit 300 before July. So I think that still actually ends up happening. Really, really beautiful, beautiful price action, general nice movement. Google, again, highest price in human history as well.
Wow.
You have what's called a very large open gap right here that occurred on pretty stupendous earnings also. So if we just look at Google's earnings, they did 109 billion. Look at their earnings per share. I mean, they just knocked it out the park. So their earnings were almost stronger than ever. Again, people are like, how? But these are the companies that are spending a lot of money on marketing advertising. They need to get in front of new people. So Google, incredibly, incredibly strong. This gap, I would imagine, does fill at some point, this 360 price area on Google. But that, to me, is extremely, extremely buyable. Very, very strong trend. Kind of similar to this one right here. Although it wasn't earnings related, it had that previous all-time high gap, and we traded back into that and then just kind of continued to rip a little bit. So buy the dip is still, in my personal opinion, in full force. Amazon, highest price in human history, again, had a really, really remarkable move from 200, which it hit back on last earnings, into 272. So
Wow.
again, Amazon up 35% in the last 2.5 months. Again, highest price ever, which is nice. That's going to allow for a little bit of a retracement to happen back into 260. And again, that would also be buyable. So again, looking at the largest names on earth, the biggest companies, although I didn't look at NVIDIA, it's the same thing. It's like, well, the chart says they're going to go higher. So we got to be bullish. I mean, you can't make these new highs. I know it's wild. It's
Dude,
one of those like, why would it? But it will.
It is, look, it's so disconnected from reality, and that's, like the markets don't seem to be pricing in like what's actually happening. Now I get it, like there's money that's happening, and it's in this magnificent seven world, and we've talked about like it's also like circulating, right? It's like money's going to Nvidia, and Nvidia is selling to you, and money's going to Nvidia,
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah,
so it's
yeah,
this.
yeah.
So the value underneath it is kind of like and then it's like AI, and we talk about an AI bubble. Well, it's bubblicious sort of everywhere, and then underneath it, what is it actually creating? Like the molecules have to be drilled out of the ground, right? Like
Yeah.
the atoms have to be moving, and with everything at high levels, I don't mean to be, I don't know, was it Cassandra about this? It was like, oh my God, it's like I was around in '99. Like I was
Yeah.
in it to
It
win
feels
it.
very similar.
2000,
It feels very similar.
with everything hot, like, and with when there is no value, then it is like it is musical chairs at this point. So that's where it's like, look, be careful, guys. Make sure you have protection on the downside.
Yeah.
Because underneath it, it feels very much like a two-legged stool. There's, like the fundamentals underneath it are kind of like bonkers, right? And
Yep.
you don't really, create create expenses going through the roof like this through oil, and have it sit there for 2 months and really having no end in sight. Like there really isn't an end to sight on this. It doesn't look like anything's going to get better, and even if it does like magically get better today, it doesn't mean like oil starts flowing out of the ground. Like there is a future the the stock futures, like stuff that you're predicting in the future, are
Yep.
tied to the oil futures, stuff that we're predicting in the future. It
Yeah.
seems to be disconnected between what's happening in reality right now. And so like my ability to predict the future would be wild. Like if I I would be I'd probably have a totally different lifestyle if I was predicting the future. But it's like I predict.
Yeah.
So the people that I listen to, the economists, the stock folks like you and Steve, it's like I'm looking for what's underneath that's actually like real. And when there's so little that's real, and it's like it feels very very man behind the curtain, feels very very Oz related, and that's like that's where we need the pullbacks. We need reality to set in somewhere. I don't know when. Like you and I have talked about this forever. You can't predict when these things are going to be happening, and like what you can do to protect yourself is going to be clutch. Like there's only so much. But on the political side, I think China is going to be key. Like the United States is really needs help with the Israeli-U.S. War with Iran, and China can be a big player there. And like we might be able to see some real movement there, and with the stuff in Russia, and if we can get the politicians out of the way, like reasonable heads can really prevail there, and we could have like
Yeah.
some sustainable things happen out of this. That's what I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to.
Totally.
If we don't hear that, then what we are going to hear is like a lot of fluffy stuff around chips and AI, and
Yep.
maybe some manufacturing stuff, and that's kind of like a big yawn as far as I'm concerned, because all of those deals, like one of them, I mean, how many trade deals were thrown up in the air with tariffs last year, and how many trade deals do we actually have today? I think we have two. One of them's like with Vietnam and maybe India, or UK. Yeah, UK was like the other one. I mean, that's out of throwing out like 100 trade deals. We have two. So like, all
Yeah.
right,
Correct. Correct.
like
Art of the deal. It's like, bro,
boo,
you didn't do a great job.
boo. All right,
Yeah.
what are the big movers this week for your stocks? What are you looking at?
Well, so a lot of data and a lot of data centers
Yeah,
and a lot of data plays. I mean, that's the ironic part. So you have Iren, IREN is a data processing service company. They just did a convertible $2 billion note after earnings. So That's going to be one to really keep an eye on. Wolf, TerraWolf, WULF. Would love for this to pull back into, I'll do another quick screen share. Would love for it to pull back into approximately $22. Give me 1 second. I know you made a cute amount of money on Wolf not that long ago. Here's the overall trend for that. So TerraWolf, again, just in general, looks really strong. I mentioned IREN. So again, this is gapping down, which will be a fun day trade opportunity. But in general, the chart does look quite nice. INOD, another data play, had a huge move on earnings. I know, crazy. So just absolute just rippage for this one. So this would be probably, as of right now, a much faster trade for anyone who's watching and tuning into these episodes often and frequently. But INOD is a very, very interesting play. GoDaddy, believe it or not, I still think it's kind of cool. Just at the levels that it is. So it's up 1% yesterday. I don't know why my screen's not loading. But, if AI is a big thing, obviously it is, are people going to be using more or less websites? And I think people are going to be using more websites. I think more purchases will happen. And in general, the company is still fundamentally quite strong. So You've had a humongous pullback on GoDaddy. It was at $210 and has pulled all the way back to $91, which is the previous breakout range of this, 2018 to 2023 compression. So I actually am buying some GoDaddy down here. I like it. And then, we'll see what happens, obviously, but I'm picking some up. Tesla. So this is one I really, really like from an oil play. We keep talking about oil, but my actual anticipation on this one realistically is we've had 3 beautiful buying days in a row, which was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're above the 100-200. So expecting Tesla to probably, most likely, hopefully, pull back to 406 before it does end up going higher. But if you think about it, the oil, right? If everyone's vehicle expenses are going up because of gas expenses, well, Tesla doesn't have any gas expenses. And one of the things that hasn't been dramatically noticeable, believe it or not, at least to me, is energy expense. So I haven't noticed it, not saying that it will not ever be this way, but like just the heating and cooling costs, right? The electricity costs of my house, water bill, things of that nature haven't been dramatically changed by the gas prices. So I'm noticing, seeing that they're like, well, hey, I got to go buy more Tesla. I got to go buy more Tesla stock, and I got to go buy the actual vehicle because I can't spend as much money on gas.
Well, that's exactly where I'm going to be in your Q2 numbers. Like I was like, hey, Jeremy, how do I buy a Tesla? And he goes, let me show you. And go to tesla.com. And I'm like, okay.
Which is cool. Yeah, exactly. You can customize it. And it's, it'll show up. It'll drive itself to your house, which is really wild.
I'm down. And I was talking to Joe. He has an electric vehicle. And I was like, what are the pricing as far as like, like, I don't know how you do it, but like comparison, like a gallon of gas versus like whatever the wattage is. And he goes, yeah, it's pretty reasonable, right? Like even when you go out, and charge it, it's like, it's not, it's not, what you'd consider cheap, but it's cheaper than gas. And I'm like, oh, well, that's great. Fantastic.
Yep. Agreed.
Well, that's a big week. I think there's a lot going on, both politically and, we'll keep on watching it. We'll keep on, joining you here every Monday, and look for us on Tuesdays and Thursdays with Steve at Quasar Markets. But it's fun. It's been real. Be careful. I think that's our. It's a great that should be our face tattoo. Be careful. That's right. Be careful. What was it? There was an old TV show called Hill Street Blues. I didn't watch it. It was a little bit, outside of where I was watching. It was like, be careful out there. They would end every single briefing with the cops of like, okay, be careful out there. Well, that's what your stock tips for today is be careful out there.
That's right. Yeah. Buy low and buy slow right now. That's for sure. Appreciate you, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. You rock.